Dr. Sheffi, can you talk to us about the famous risk matrix? Everybody uses it when they do some type of risk assessment. And also talk to us about your third dimension, your third characteristic you're adding to it.
Let's start talking about the standard risk matrix. It's basically used in order to prioritize where people should put their efforts. It's a two-dimensional matrix. One dimension is the probability that the event will happen. Another dimension is the consequences. These are the two dimensions. The consequences are, if it happens, how bad it's going to be. So the lower left-hand side is low probability and low consequences. We really shouldn't worry about it. These events that don't happen a lot, if they happen, no big deal. If you go up to the upper left-hand side, this is high probability but low consequences. Again, these are things that happen all the time, day to day. Shipment is late, the yield is not what you expected. Manufacturing, supply chain, procurement managers handle it day to day all the time. What most risk managers focus on is the upper right-hand side, which is high consequences, high probability. The things, because these are, if you look at expected value, it's the probability times the consequences. These are the events that happen relatively often, and they are very large consequences. Example is hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. These are events that you have to prepare for. However, in my book, literally, these are not the most. This is not where all the effort should be focused. There's the lower right-hand side where you have very low probability but high consequences. These are the unknown unknowns, or the black swans, that they did not happen before, not to you, nor to your competitor, nor anywhere in the world. You don't have any process to anticipate them. You don't have any process to prepare for them. You have to prepare for those two events, those two types of events at the same time. So for the events that happened before and the high consequences, you can have what Cisco calls a playbook. So you identify, Cisco, for example, identified, I think 14, I don't remember the exact number of, or types of event, and they have a playbook, what they should do in case of this particular of event, how they mitigate the risk, how they preposition inventory, what they do in this case. Sometimes they'll have a dual source, sometimes they'll buy more inventory. They'll do something in order to prepare for something that has, reasonable probability of happening. What people most of the time miss is these black swans. And for black swan, you have to prepare differently because you don't know what will happen. So you have to prepare general resilience. You have to know who to call. You have to understand who will run the show. You have to understand what will be the role of the senior executives, general communication strategy, without knowing what type of events will take place. So for one event, for the high probability, high consequence event, you develop playbooks. You try to identify the type of events. You say, okay, this is how I can mitigate it. And then you work on the unknown unknowns, what Rumsfeld called unknown unknowns, or Taleb called black swans. You have to develop general resilience, general structure of the company that can be ready for anything. The example is Intel Corporate Emergency Operations Center and Emergency Operations Center structure, or Walmart Emergency Operations Center that works all the time. They don't know what will happen, but they have a readiness for what will happen. So these are the two areas maybe that I want to emphasize, not only the high consequence, high probability event, but the high consequence, low probability event that you don't even know what they are. You mentioned the third dimension. I like to add another axis. Think about these two axes and then another axis that go in the Z direction that I call detectability. It has to do with time dimensions. There are some events that you know, some disruption that you know they hit you only after they hit you. There's no warning.
Yeah.
If you think about theft of intellectual property, you may not even know that something was stolen. If you think about some cyber attack, you don't know that it happened. Only after the fact you may find out that something happened. Then there are events for which there's a very short warning, like a tsunami. There are tsunami sensors along all the Pacific coast, and they give you, depending where the earthquake is, they can give you warning somewhere between 30 seconds and 30 minutes. Then there are things for which you have 2, 3, 4 days type of warning, like hurricanes, for example. You know the vector of the hurricane, but you can never be sure exactly. But you have a warning, and it gets better and better as the hurricane landfall gets close. And then you have things for which you have maybe several weeks worth of warning, like deteriorating labor relationship. See, there's deteriorating, you can watch it, they say, okay, there might be a strike happening somewhere. 2 weeks from now, the union may vote on a strike. So you have more time to prepare. Then there are long-term trends. Aging, global warming, deteriorating infrastructure. They happen over time. The point is that the danger is, of course, with things, the shorter the time, the bigger the danger, and it's biggest when you don't even know that you're being hit. But on the other hand, the longer the time, the more opportunity there is to do something about it. So if you think about aging, it changes the buying habits of population. It changes, you see, for example, one such trend is urbanization. 2008 was a watershed year. More people lived in urban area than not around the globe. And the number of people living in urban areas is actually growing. And you see Walmart, Target, Tesco, Carrefour, all changing store formats to have small stores in urban area because they're trying to catch this market. Again, it's a long-term adjustment to changing demographies and taste in this case and where people live. So there's opportunity in the long-term trend because he who adjusts better and faster can reap rewards. So that's
nice.
the third dimension of the what I call the risk matrix.
So it tells you a little bit about preparation and investment and allocation.
Exactly.
Resources. What do most organizations use when they do the risk matrix and they say they got the cube view that you're describing? What does a company do after that?
Okay. First of all, I should say that the new dimension is not yet used in industry. Most people in industry use 2 dimensions. Just the classic.
Is the 3rd dimension in your new book?
Yeah, it will be in my new book, whenever my new book will come out.
Okay.
But yeah, the 3rd dimension will be there. There are some, people look at it differently in many cases. They look at long-term trend as something different than kind of separate from risk matrix. But long-term trend can be risk and reward. There's opportunity in long-term trend because you have time to adjust. Most companies are using these matrices, whether 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, in order to prioritize, to decide on risk. And the way they do it is literally sitting around a group of people deciding what can go wrong, what did go wrong, what happened to suppliers. It's
direction
largely influenced by the past, of course. Something that happened to us, we tend to think about it a lot. But in many cases, it's done with somebody from the outside leading the discussion and working with some large companies like GM have a risk management group. The risk management group it's not a crisis management group. It's totally separate. They just identify risks and try to see if we should use this supplier or not. But they're not really crisis. They're not at all involved in crisis management. Crisis management is logistics, procurement, engineering, marketing. The operating function. I mean, fix it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure.